Yo, what's up YouTube world? Shawn Myszka, Explosive Edge Athletics, coming to you in regards to our first installment of our quick tips in regards to our jump technique. Now, there was numerous places that we could have started when we looked towards fine-tuning the details of our jump technique and the working effect that is related or correlated to that. But I figured what better place to start than from the ground up. You know, it's intuitively obvious that no matter how much power we put out through our quads and our hamstrings and our glutes and all throughout all those muscle groups that are going to contribute to our push-off phase of our jump, all of that is going to be limited by if we have energy leakage through our foot position in the way that our form is being dictated by how we select that foot position. That being said, everything today is about that foot position and the accompanying toe angle that we choose. Now we know that the foot angle as well as the foot position from a width standpoint that we select is going to dictate the joint alignment that we ultimately have. And if it's going to be dictating our joint alignment, it's also going to dictate the joint range of motion that we are going to possess based on that positioning. Therefore, in turn, it's also going to change our muscle contribution as well as the muscle coordination sequence that we find, all based on that one little small detail of either having our foot position in an optimal standpoint or in stance being in an optimal one. That being said, when we look at the research that's out there, it's actually fairly limited. But we can look at what science and what physics would show us in regards to what lines of forces as well as leverage points we can possess based on having the proper foot position that we're going to find. It also can be based off of personal preference, what we've accustomed or acclimated ourselves to doing. It can also look towards, we can also look towards to see what our body positioning needs to be based on our own body structure. If we're short or if we're tall, what our limb lengths are or what our muscle angle of pronation is going to be. That being said, I see way too many athletes jump from either a too wide a stance or a too narrow one. So I'm here to give you just a few tips in regards to that. The first thing that I would suggest that you do is to measure jump heights from numerous different widths and just try to see, are you jumping typically from a 8 or 9 or 12 inch type distance in between your feet. Typically, science would show us exactly where the lines of force are going to be created. If we have too wide of stance and we start to squat down during our counter movement jump, we know that we could have some knee valgus, and therefore not only does it make us more apt to be injured, but it can also put us in a position where we're leaking energy that our body's actually developing from our hips and then our quads and our hamstrings and our glutes. Also, I want to make the key point here that if you are a different sport athlete, that maybe vertical jumping isn't necessarily a key aspect necessarily in regards to your success, but you may have to test out on it in order to maybe earn a position on a team or test out in regards to a given combine or something of that nature, you're going to want to select positions that are going to be conducive or correspond to the sport demands first and foremost, but you also want to pay very close attention to this foot width. So this video series is essentially about those individuals who are just looking to go upwards in the best, most possible, most optimal fashion, excuse me. So what can we actually do to enhance? Like I said, first see where your stance, your typical stance is. After that point, we can look towards seeing what we need to do that would become more optimal. Maybe you'll find when you videotape yourself or when you just measure it out and then measure the heights that you're getting with those given stances, that you could do something by changing in an inch or two and your vertical jump performance actually goes up immediately. And that's what we find. What I typically suggest people to do is to assume a stance that creates a straight line of force from their armpit down into their hips, which would be right below their center of mass, and then create a straight line of force down throughout the entire legs. And that usually will create the best possible, most optimal jump height. However, in a few particular instances where maybe people have not jumped in that style before, we will see higher heights from a wider or narrower stance, and we might just have to look and see, is that optimal or is it not? Once we do that, we simply have to find our optimal stance and then try to repeat that over and over and over again repetitively. perfect practice makes perfect. So you need to repeat that as often as humanly possible so we can get the nervous system getting used to actually firing in the correct capacity. From there, we can look toward doing certain strength movements in that actual stance. Now, I know some people will argue with me in regards to the specificity concept and the concept of dynamic correspondence, but really the dynamic correspondence theory that would be proposed from the old Soviet Union and that should still hold true today when we look at having a direct carryover and transfer to the actual sport motor task that we want to perform, is we can do things such as squats or deadlifts or actual box jumps or even just vertical jumping in the exact stance that we will use in the motor task. So I would recommend assuming that stance when we squat or when we deadlift and the like. I see too often people who jump find their jump technique to be here, and then they continue to do low bar, wide stance type squatting in the hopes that it'll increase or have a carryover into that jump performance. It will, but it won't to the exact degree that we possibly could want it to. So that being said, measure it out, see where you're at, and see where we need to go from there in order to optimize. There will be more tips to come, plenty more tips to come, but for Shawn Myszka and Explosive Athletics, thank you for listening to this video. Let us know if there's specific things that you want to hear about, and I'll put it out, but there will be plenty more to come, so please stay tuned. Thank you.